Good morning from Liverpool and day 2 of my adventures in Merseyside on Merseyrail. Yesterday I travelled along the southern part of the Northern Line from Hunts Cross, even though Liverpool South Parkway is actually the most southern station, up until the city centre loop on the Wirral Lines. Did Hamilton Square on the opposite side of the River Mersey. This time I'm continuing along the Wirral Lines on the branches to West Kirby and New Brighton, and my train is coming in now. When I was buying my ticket this morning, quite a good price by the way, £6 for a day save ticket across the network, I noticed that there's a lot of Merseyrail goodies that you can buy, and so I gave in and bought myself a fridge magnet. Something I didn't mention yesterday about these underground Liverpool stations is just how cold they are. Londoners can only dream of something like that. And the first station stop of today is Conway Park, which is very yellow and quite unusual because it's out in the open, but the railway through here is still in a tunnel. So like Brunswick Station yesterday, this one opened the same year in 1998 to provide better connections to Birkenhead on these two branches. And in the planning stages, it was even going to be called Birkenhead Market. Now though, Conway Park, not a whole lot here, quite quiet, and a strange kind of winged entrance which kind of reminds me of Edmonton Green bus station to be precise. Next stop, Birkenhead Park, for the world's first public park of the same name. Well, surely if this opportunity has presented itself, I have to go and visit it. Birkenhead Park first opened in 1847 and even helped inspire Central Park in New York City. I'm about to cross over this Swiss bridge here as I walk around the lake. Been in hundreds of public parks, and I like that this almost unassuming little place has the claim to fame to have the world's first. There's an old Roman boathouse over there as well. Well, I'm back at the station, going to skip the next one as it's the junction between the two branches, so I'll do it after I've done one and I come back and change. Before I jump on my next train, I want to talk about these older signs at Merseyrail stations that label a place to visit in the local area, because Birkenhead Park station is the only one which I've seen that has two separate ones for two different places, world's first public park and the Docklands. I've decided to do the New Brighton branch first, and the first station on this line is Wallasey Village. This part of the railway opened in 1888 from Birkenhead North, but this station in particular didn't open until 1907 and had a different name, Leasowe Road. It really doesn't feel like much of a village though when you have this major main road down here. Now there is a second Wallasey station along this branch, Wallasey Grove Road, which is the original one that opened in 1888, but was also originally known as just Wallasey. Whilst Wallasey Village was built high on top of a road bridge, this one is actually, I guess, level with the streets that it brings you out onto. They're actually so close to each other, these two Wallasey stations, that you could probably walk between the two and make the next train, but I've instead just hung around for 15 minutes at both of them. The special thing about these two Wallasey stations though is that if my calculations are correct, there are currently 2,583 stations across Great Britain, and I have a running station count of how many I've visited, but also how many that I've stopped at by train. And I believe 50% wouldn't actually be a full number, but these two stations make up the 50%, so I have stopped at 50% of the stations in the country. I've still got a lot more to go though. Also, 2017 Cheshire Best Kept Station. But have we not been in Merseyside the entire time? Or does Cheshire just rate stations outside of its county as well? We've come to the end of the first branch line already here at New Brighton. But back in the day there would have been another station called Warren, but that closed years ago in 1915. And whilst we're here, I mean, I have to go and visit the seaside, right? Before I head for the water though, this is a perfect moment to talk about Merseyrail's trains, because these are the new ones, the class 777s or 777s as they're probably better known as. And they have replaced these, the class 507s, and up until a few days ago these were the oldest trains running on the National Rail network, built in 1978. And there just so happens to be one here in the sidings at New Brighton. You know, it's a shame that I've only just missed out on what was going to be my first and last journey on one of these, but that's okay because I've still managed to at least see one. I'm happy with that. Leaving the station and heading for the coast, I seemed to stumble across a Pride festival, which was unexpected, and walking down this street reminds me of some of the side streets in actual Brighton on the south coast. Well, I'm instantly liking New Brighton more than actual Brighton because, well, it's sandy, not stony. I'm getting a great view as well looking back towards Liverpool locations, which I'm now familiar with. And I'm the type of person who even likes looking out over towards the industry and the docks on that side. But you've also got here Fort Perth Rock. That's a really majestic structure right here by the mouth of the River Mersey. I think the sea continues around the other side and back up that way, which we could use to walk along to loop back around to the station. Fort Perch Rock. Perch, I think I was saying Perth. There's a lighthouse here too in New Brighton. I think at low tide you can actually walk out towards it, but I mean, I'm not going to do that now. This is really nice. Pleasant experience. And my loop of New Brighton comes to an end. Won't be catching this train now though, will I? It will be a 777 back up to Birkenhead North to change onto the West Kirby branch. So, big problem has occurred. There's a 15-minute service on this line, as I've previously mentioned, but for some reason, mid-lunchtime, there's a half an hour gap. What I thought I'd do is make the train before that half an hour gap, except it's been cancelled. Merseyrail, you were slowly becoming my new favourite train operating company in just 2 days. Why have you cancelled the train just before your one and only half an hour gap? I could have chilled on the beach for half an hour if I had known in advance, but you cancelled it like 3 minutes before departure. I would later find out, and this was something I suspected, that the reason for this gap in service could be because they were running final tests on some of the new trains. That doesn't stop it still being quite frustrating though when a train pulls in and very easily could have filled in that gap, but instead it just goes out of service. I was secretly hoping, by the way, that they would bring back one of the old trains to cover for the cancelled service, because as I headed back on our really busy train towards Birkenhead North, there's a train depot and you can spot one of the class 507s in there. But what's that train outside of the depot? A quick change at Birkenhead North, no dawdling around. I didn't want to be any more delayed than I already was. Not much to say about this station anyways, apart from the fact that when it originally opened, it was known as Birkenhead Docks until 1926. The first station on the West Kirby branch is Bidston, where you can change for another railway, The Bordersland Line. This station's had a bit of a potted history. When it originally opened in 1866, it ran into a different Birkenhead dock station that isn't the renamed Birkenhead North one, but then was closed between 1870 and 1872 and between 1890 and 1895, as it was quite isolated and was primarily used as an interchange station when the Bordersland Line opened. That line itself ran into a place called Seacombe, where I caught the ferry across the Mersey yesterday, but after that line closed, services went to New Brighton instead. However, the curve to New Brighton closed in 1971, so trains were diverted into Birkenhead North instead. But in 1978, services were cut back eventually to just Bidston. Now that the oldest trains on the network are no longer operating with Merseyrail, what technically is the oldest trains remaining are on this line operated by Transport for Wales, as they are old London Underground District Line trains that was known as the D78 stock, even though they didn't enter service until 1980. And yes, there are older trains still operating on the London Underground, but in terms of national rail, this now will be the oldest train remaining on the network. And if it wasn't for the cancelled train, I would have got a better shot of it, as there was one scheduled to arrive and depart from Bidston. At this point, the knock-on effect occurred from my cancelled train, and more of them were starting to get delayed and or cancelled because of the earlier signal failure. So considering I was going to have another half an hour wait, I thought I'd do something sneaky where I bypass the next station and then reverse and then continue, so I do 2 stations for the price of 1. So I headed to Moreton first. There's actually another Moreton in Dorset and a Moreton in Marsh on the Cotswold line, before I then reversed back to Leasowe. When I got back to Leasowe and was crossing over to the other platform, I noticed that there was a train coming that didn't look like it was stopping, and I suspect that this was the cancelled one that was running fast to try and make up time. When I got to the platform though, I was gutted that my little ploy didn't seem to work out to save time, as the trains were just delayed again. When the times did show up, it was a 20-minute delay. So I guess this gives me time to mention how when this station opened in 1870, it was known as Leasowe Crossing, but whilst Bidston reopened in 1872, this one closed that year until 1894. A strange thing happened next though, as I didn't actually have to wait 20 minutes. One showed up after 10, but I couldn't find what train this was scheduled to be. No matter, because either way, it brings me to my next station. At least I'm making progress. And that station is Mells, I think, which was rebuilt in 1938 to coincide with the railway line being electrified, hence the Art Deco style look the station has, which is very, very similar to Moreton Station. But this entrance is flipped and much more cramped. Unfortunately though, the problems continued, as the next train, which was shown as delayed at Leasowe, becomes cancelled here at Mells, and the one behind gets more and more delayed the longer I wait here. But at least there's a nice lake tucked behind the platform which I could admire in the meantime. Eventually, I make it to Manor Road, which opened later than the other stations in 1940, and it seemed like some of the delayed trains were starting to run quite close to each other, so I didn't have that long of a wait at the next 2 stations. Quite confusing though how you're showing that there's a West Kirby train from both platforms 1 and 2, because yes, they do go around the loop in Liverpool to come straight back, even though I suspect some of them weren't doing that to try and make up some time. You shouldn't be showing that they're going from both platforms, because that just makes it more confusing. I didn't have that long to wait at the penultimate stop of Hoylake, which was the original terminus of the line in 1866, also rebuilt in 1938, before I finally make it to West Kirby. I finally made it to West Kirby, about half an hour late overall, but I did have a plan for a walk between Manor Road and Hoylake, which if I did would have got me here half an hour later anyways. And you might be able to realise that, just like New Brighton, and I kind of suspected that this might be a thing, there's an old train behind as well, a Class 507 tucked into the sidings here. West Kirby Station opened in 1878, but right next door there used to be one that opened even earlier in 1868. Nothing left to see of it nowadays, but you can walk the old railway on which it sat on, which is now known as the Wirral Way. This railway line ran towards Houghton between 1866 and 1962, and if it was still open today and you rerouted Merseyrail trains to serve it, you could have services do a continuous loop, as this would be a loop to head back towards Liverpool, and of course there is the loop in Liverpool as well. And my short but sweet walk along the abandoned railway line ends at a disused station called Conway Park, which was in operation from 1894 to 1956. And the Wirral Country Park, which this is the first designated country park in the country back in 1973, which seems quite fitting considering we started off with the world's first public park earlier in Birkenhead. To loop back around towards the station, considering we're on the Wirral Peninsula, I thought I would head for the coast, but I was very surprised to see just how far out the tide actually is here. I can still take a walk alongside water though, because there's this incredible path between the coast and Marine Lake, which is a very fun path to take. Not so much when the sun is blaring right in your eyes though, so I was glad for when the path started to loop back around. When I saw the sign at West Kirby Station for Hillbrook Island, I didn't know what that was, I hadn't heard of it, but as I was walking around Marine Lake, I spot this island far off in the distance, and I'm like, whoa, at low tides you can walk all the way out to that? That would have been really cool to do, but if I wasn't so tired and the fact that I just wanted to chill on the beach with some food from the chippy, I might have done that, but hey, you never know, I could come back one day and do it. I just have to hope that I come at the perfect time of low tide. When I made it back to West Kirby Station, I didn't realise just how nice the station building actually was. I was keeping an eye on the times, and luckily my train back towards Liverpool was on time. Despite 2 days in Liverpool, one station has eluded me the entire time, and it just so happens to be the biggest and busiest one, Liverpool Lime Street. I like how a lot of the major terminus city stations across the country as well are just named after some random street, like Birmingham New Street, Glasgow Queen Street, and now you have Liverpool Lime Street. And I'm back at Crewe, where my adventure began yesterday. It's a shame that Merseyrail kind of fumbled a little bit near the end there, but that's not too bad because I only ended up being half an hour delayed, and it didn't end up me having to rush my West Kirby Explore. Fast train. Sometimes I worry with some of these bigger trips out of London if something was to go wrong, because my day is so jam-packed full of things, the whole plan can just go out the window, but luckily that didn't end up happening, and I really enjoyed my trip to Liverpool. Out of all of the cities that I hadn't visited in the country, Liverpool was probably top of the list of ones which I wanted to explore, and now that I've done that, maybe York is up there. I also want to do Newcastle and Sunderland properly as well. So I would love at some point to come back to Liverpool and ride more of the Merseyrail branches. Oh yeah, favourite and least favourite stations. I want to say James Street's the favourite one just because of that disused platform alone, but honourable mentions go to Cressington, Conway Park and the towers of Hamilton Square and West Kirby. Least favourite, much easier, Wallasey Village. Just wasn't a nice place to wait for a train.